You'd think I'd be better at this by now. The lying. My heart pounded against my ribs as if trying to escape, threatening to give me away. Sweat prickled my brow, a sure sign. I never sweat. But Alex? He didn't notice a thing. Late night at the office again? Pun? His voice echoed in the cavernous kitchen. A casual accusation masked with concern. I could smell it on me, that damned sandalwood cologne. The one he wears. My stomach twisted. I forced my features into a light-hearted grin. You know how it gets, I chirped. The chirpiness feeling as fake as a plastic Christmas tree. Client dinners, deadlines, all the usual excuses tumbled from my traitorous mouth. Lies slick and practiced. Alex, bless his sweet, oblivious heart, just nodded. My husband, the gentle giant. Kind eyes, that steady smile. God, I felt like a monster. But I couldn't stop, not now. The lies were the easy part. It was the sneaking, the seedy hotel rooms in the bad part of town. The feeling of hot, unfamiliar hands on me. That was the stuff I craved. And it terrified me. Who was I becoming? Earth to Sarah? Alex waved a hand in front of my face, snapping me out of my guilty reverie. Hey, you still with me? Sorry, I mumbled. Just tired. The warmth in his eyes made me want to crawl under a rock and hide. He didn't deserve this. But neither did I deserve whatever this was. Not a life of whispered rendezvous and half-truths. Not this burning need for something I knew I shouldn't want. Something that would shatter Alex into a million pieces. A shadow fell across the kitchen, and my stomach clenched again. Alex wasn't the only one who'd picked up on my distraction. It was Max, our lanky, perpetually messy teenager. Mom, Max's brow creased, his two knowing eyes mirroring his father's. You sure you're okay? You seem, like, super spacey. See, I wasn't just imagining things. I'd never been a great actress, apparently. I forced a tighter smile, a brittle mask to hide the swirling mess within. Teenagers, I quipped, attempting to deflect. You drain all the brain cells out of me. Max rolled his eyes, but I saw the flicker of relief. I'd bought myself a little more time, but with every passing minute, the walls seemed to close in. I needed to escape, just for tonight. I could handle the guilt, the shame, anything, if I got another taste of him. That addictive, illicit rush I was powerless to resist, no matter the cost. I just have to be a bit more careful from now on, a little less obvious, and a whole lot better at lying. The lies came easier now, smoother. I played my dual roles like a seasoned actress. To Alex, the dutiful wife, baking pies and asking about his day with eyes that promised safe harbor. Meanwhile, my other self, bolder and untamed, craved only his touch, his laughter echoing in the dingy, neon-lit rooms that became our haven. My phone wasn't just a device, it was a lifeline. A portal to coded messages filled with longing, racy photos, and the hushed whisper of shared secrets. My reflection in the mirror mocked me. Tired eyes ringed with lies, but a wicked thrill sparking in their depths. Who was I becoming? The burden of it all gnawed at me. Every shared meal with Alex, every kind word, every smile he gave me, it felt like acid against my soul. And yet, it didn't stop me. I was addicted to the double life, the danger, the passionate storm that was him. Nights at home turned into exercises in self-imprisonment. Alex would share the minutiae of his work with that trusting smile, the same one I'd fallen in love with years ago. Now, it felt like a noose around my neck. The familiar hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock on the wall. They taunted me, a soundtrack to my betrayal. Each stolen night with another man made returning home feel like wading through quicksand, dragging this grotesque masquerade behind me. One morning, with the house eerily quiet and Alex already off to work, a wave of nausea crashed over me. In the mirror, above the cracked pedestal sink of our guest bathroom, I saw it. Not the lines of exhaustion or the telltale signs of my nightly adventures. I saw a ghost, a hollow-eyed shadow of the woman who used to sing in the shower, who laughed loud enough to fill the whole house. A sob tore through me, sharp and ugly. What the hell was I doing? What was I becoming? I was shattering, splintering into a million pieces. And the worst part? I didn't know if I could, or even wanted to, pick them back up. Mark. That was his name. It echoed in my head, a drumbeat to the wild thrumming in my veins. Mark. With his expensive suits and laugh that carried a hint of danger. He was the hurricane to Alex's gentle breeze. Our world was stolen hours, swanky hotel bars smelling of leather and expensive perfume, hasty whispers against crisp sheets. He was Wall Street deals and midnight cocktails, and who was I? Anymore? I craved that world. The world where I wasn't Alex's reliable wife or Max's doting mom. I was just desired, wanted with an intensity that set my blood aflame. And yeah, I knew it was messed up. Mark's life was just as much a well-constructed facade as mine, I'm sure. But the lies, the secrets, they held a sick fascination. With him, I wasn't building something. I was burning everything down. It was glorious and terrifying all at once. With every illicit meeting, every whispered promise echoing against the sterile hotel walls, I drifted further away from home. Alex was becoming a vague memory, like a half-forgotten dream. Yet, I couldn't stop. I craved Mark, craved the feel of his hands on me, the heady mix of power and abandon he represented. Soon, he'd murmur the word against my skin, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Soon we'd be free, run away together, build a life outside of shadows. Yeah, right, even in my delusional state, I knew empty promises when I heard them. The guilt twisted inside me, a constant, aching reminder of the monster I was becoming. But even then, it was always drowned out by the rush of danger, the need for more. I wasn't just falling, I was leaping off the cliff of morality, eyes wide open, and the worst part? I was kind of enjoying the view. Mistake number one, thinking I was in control. That arrogance faded pretty quickly as a smear of crimson lipstick stared back at me from the bathroom mirror, the shade I wore on nights with Mark, not with Alex. A cold sweat broke out across my brow. I scrubbed frantically at the stain, heart pounding in my ears. Had Alex noticed? Was I about to be caught so stupidly? The cracks in my charade were widening. Alex wasn't an idiot. Hell, he was the furthest thing from it. He was kind, trusting, and I played those qualities like a fiddle for my own twisted symphony of lies. Now, a flicker of doubt lurked in his eyes, his smile a little less sure. I'd gone from actress to hunted animal, and the fear was eating me alive. My phone was the worst. It buzzed with each innocuous notification, making me jump like a spooked cat. A text from Mark, or worse, a text meant for him, sent to me by some vengeful twist of fate. My dreams were no sanctuary either. Alex stared at me, his face twisted, screaming accusations I'd only voiced in my own guilty nightmares. The weight of it all became a lead vest strapped to my soul. 3 years of deception. Mark, at first a whirlwind of excitement, now felt like a noose closing in with each sunrise. I was drowning in guilt, in paranoia, in a desperate longing for everything I'd so easily cast aside. Panic gnawed at me, relentless and vicious. It was only a matter of time before my lies were laid bare, before Alex looked at me and saw everything. I was falling apart, piece by piece. But the sickest part? A small voice in my head whispered, "You deserve this. Sarah. You okay?" Alex's voice, soft and filled with concern, jolted me into the present. He was standing in our bedroom doorway, brow furrowed. I must have looked completely unhinged. My breath hitched. This was it. The moment everything came crashing down. For a split second, a flicker of perverse relief ran through me. Maybe it was time. Maybe I couldn't keep carrying this poisonous secret anymore. I opened my mouth, but all that came out was a weak, pathetic, "Yeah, fine. Just tired." The lie, as always, came easy. The guilt, heavier than ever, did not. Okay, time for some truth bombs. I couldn't live with it anymore. The lies, the charade, they were choking me. So, sitting at our kitchen table, the one where I'd cooked countless dinners and shared so many laughs, I spilled it all. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Mark, the hotel rooms, the promises. A grotesque tapestry of betrayal woven with my own trembling hands. I watched Alex's face, searching desperately for some sign that maybe, just maybe, This wasn't the end. Shock. Disbelief. Then came the gut-wrenching pain. He looked broken. The man who'd always been my rock crumbled before my eyes, and the guilt was a tidal wave crashing against my soul. My apologies, my pathetic explanations, they crashed against him. Useless. He just sat there. A statue made of wounded flesh and bone. A scream bubbled up in my throat. I wanted him to rage, yell, throw something, anything to break this damning silence. But he didn't. Instead, that quiet voice, barely a whisper above the ticking of the clock, delivered the killing blow. I need time. And just like that, it was done. The life I'd so meticulously built around lies was gone. The warm, cozy kitchen transformed into a battlefield. I didn't know who the enemy was anymore. Mark, the me who had let this happen, or the twisted knot in my stomach that said I deserved every damn second of this. The rest of the night is a blur. I think I made some weak excuse about needing rest, about a headache. I locked myself in our bedroom, the very symbol of my betrayal, and wept. Ugly, snotty sobs that seemed to come from somewhere outside of my body. Sleep was a cruel joke. My dreams a horror show filled with Alex's stricken face and Mark's mocking laughter. Morning came, harsh and unforgiving. I half expected to find the house empty, Alex's things gone. But no, he was in the kitchen, back hunched, a stranger in his own home. We circled each other like wounded animals, unsure of how to even be in the same room anymore. The silence was suffocating. It was broken by a choked question. Alex's voice raw. How long? 3 years. It felt like a lifetime, and yet, a blink of an eye. Neither of us seemed to know what to do next, what to even say. The wreckage of our marriage lay between us, and I was terrified of where the pieces might fall. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of wind through the trees outside. It all sounded like a condemnation. The house wasn't our home anymore. It was a cage, saturated with the stink of my betrayal. Alex and I, we existed in the same space but on different planets. He drifted silently, a specter wearing a face I'd once loved like my own. The quiet, God, the quiet was unbearable. 1,000 unspoken words hung between us. Should I beg for forgiveness? Should I try to explain the inexplicable? It all felt so pointless. Every day was a slow-motion car crash that I couldn't look away from. Each morning, I'd wake up with a flicker of desperate hope that it was all a nightmare, only to crash back into the brutal reality. I became a manic housewife. A spotless house, perfectly folded laundry, pathetic attempts to atone for my sins by achieving some semblance of domestic perfection. Alex barely noticed. If anything, the aroma of freshly baked bread in the air seemed to sicken him. Another bitter reminder of the lies I'd woven into the fabric of our lives. He retreated into himself, eyes hollow. The warmth in them was replaced by a cold fire. Was it hatred? Disgust? I deserved whatever he felt. Evenings were the worst. The silence stretched, our forced attempts at normal conversation crumbling into dust. My carefully crafted apologies felt like wasps in my throat. I couldn't spit them out, couldn't swallow them down. My world became a hamster wheel of guilt and despair. Calls from well-meaning friends went unanswered. Emails piled up at work. Dishes sat abandoned in the sink. I didn't recognize myself. The woman who had once laughed, who had plans and dreams, was gone. All that remained was a husk, animated by fear and remorse. One morning, how many had passed, I couldn't even say. I woke to find my side of the bed empty. A note sat on my pillow, Alex's handwriting stark against the crisp white paper. Staying with my brother for a while. Need space. And just like that, he was gone. Not with a scream, not with a fight, but the quiet devastation of a shattered glass left on the unforgiving tiles of our once perfect kitchen floor. The numbness I'd carefully cultivated shattered into icy rage. I'm leaving, Alex had announced, his tone so flat it made my skin crawl. It should have been earth-shattering, but some hollow part of me had already said goodbye months ago. He packed his suitcase with a terrifying efficiency, each folded shirt a slap in the face. I watched, a ghostly observer rather than a wife. I deserved this, the quiet, methodical dismantling of the life I'd ruined. My tears have long since dried up. All that was left was a brittle, cold anger. He turned at the door. I braced myself, expecting accusations, maybe a scream. Anything to break this sterile scene. Instead, his voice was a monotone. Don't worry, you won't lose our home. It's already in your name. A parting gift, dripping with either contempt or pity. The door clicked shut, and with that pathetic sound, the dam inside me broke. It wasn't the wailing of before. This was a guttural, animal cry, filled with the self-loathing of someone whose punishment somehow still wasn't enough. Days bled into one another, empty rooms, lawyers' sterile voices droning about assets, paperwork that felt like a death certificate for a marriage I'd already murdered. Then came the final blow, a grotesque parting shot delivered not by Alex, but in the soul-crushing language of legal jargon. A clause, the seemingly innocuous detail, leapt off the page. The house, my only remaining tether to a past I'd tainted, was no longer mine. It had been sold, months ago, to Mark. The rage that had been simmering exploded into a white-hot fury. These vultures, circling my carcass, wouldn't get away with this. It was twisted, maybe even sick, but suddenly, I felt more alive than I had in months. Something snapped inside me. For too long, I'd taken it, the guilt, the shame, my silent collapse. Now, a different kind of darkness was rising. It wasn't about fixing what I'd broken. That ship had sailed, carrying a better version of myself I'd cast overboard. This wasn't about redemption. This was about revenge. I scanned the divorce decree one more time, then carefully placed it in a drawer. Alex and Mark thought they'd won. They thought I'd play the abandoned wife, licking my wounds in a sad, empty house. Well, they had another thing coming. Mark and Alex thought their little scheme would break me. Well, they were dead wrong. If betrayal fueled my initial collapse, a far darker, sharper emotion surged through me now. Defiance. I'd cried enough. It was time I made them pay. Sleepless nights were no longer spent wallowing. My overactive brain churned out elaborate plots, each imagined scenario more satisfying than the last. Crashing their smug housewarming party, a scandalous public reveal, fantasies fueled by rage-tainted daydreams. But vengeance, it turns out, needs an element of practicality, not just wish fulfillment. So, I took stock of my situation. They'd painted me as the careless, reckless one. The woman who'd shattered a perfectly good life in pursuit of thrills. Fine. If that's what they wanted, that's what they'd get, in spades. The transformation began. Gone was the hollow-eyed, heartbroken wife. In her place, I became a specter of my old self, but amplified. I traded quiet meals at home for raucous nights out. My closet exploded with clothes that screamed, "Notice me," and my bank account took a beating from frivolous purchases I'd have scoffed at a year ago. Each time Mark's number popped up on my phone, a thrill of cruel excitement ran through me. I'd play the wounded bird, let him coo words of fake sympathy, then laugh in his face. His panicked concern, the attempts to help me, it was delicious. They thought I was spiraling, but really, I was spiraling upward, building a character they wouldn't see coming. With a newfound clarity, I realized that the best revenge wouldn't be one dramatic act. It would be a slow burn, me as a constant irritant in their lives, a garish reminder of their mistakes. Each echo of laughter in the house he'd given me, each careless dollar spent, was a small act of defiance. Yes, I was broken, but hell, if I wasn't going to wield those shattered pieces as weapons. Let's be real here, forgiveness is for suckers. Alex and Mark wanted me to slink away, tail between my legs, the sad cliché of the cheated-on woman. Oh hell no, not this time. If this divorce was a war, I was suddenly craving battle, and they'd made one fatal miscalculation. They'd forgotten I wasn't just some heartbroken housewife. The Sarah they used to know was dead. Long live the new me, a woman with nothing left to lose and a thirst for making them pay. And pay they would. My nights transformed from tear-soaked misery into something far more satisfying. I dug, nose deep in the muck of their lives, unearthing the grimy underbelly of legitimate businesses, the tax loopholes, and the shady characters they cozied up to. Remember that rush I used to get from sneaking around with Mark? That was nothing compared to the thrill of using those secrets, those weaknesses against them. A whispered rumor to a competitor here, a well-timed tip to the local paper there. Their tightly controlled world started to fray around the edges. Doubt and paranoia replaced smug confidence. Their attempts to hush me up with money, with threats masked as concern, only fueled my fire. Each anonymous tick to the IRS, each carefully orchestrated whisper campaign, became a victory. Their tidy narrative, where I was the crazy ex-wife, was cracking under the pressure. Sure, my own life might not be winning any awards, but watching them squirm like worms on a hook was a damn good consolation prize. And with each move, something twisted and exhilarating began to stir within me. Not the meek woman I'd once been, but something sharper, stronger. I, Sarah, the scorned wife, was becoming the monster they'd created. It wasn't about getting back, the fight was about stupid stuff. Dishes in the sink, him working late again, stuff that didn't really matter, but it was like a match to a can of gasoline. Things exploded between us. He was yelling, saying I was selfish, that I didn't put in the work. And he was right, I knew it. Deep down I always knew our marriage had problems. It wasn't like the beginning, those butterflies in the way. I couldn't wait to see him. Now it was just routine. Comfortable at best, suffocating at worst. He stormed out and I was a mess. I didn't want to be alone, to sit and think about the things he said. Without even thinking, I grabbed my phone and called Jason. Jason was my coworker, and honestly a little bit more than that. His voice was like a cool drink on a hot day. I started crying right away, the words spilling out of me like a broken faucet. He said all the right things, stuff my husband never would. You're amazing, he told me. He doesn't deserve you. We ended up meeting at that little bar near the office, the one we'd gone to a few times for happy hour. A couple of drinks turned into more. I wanted to feel alive, to feel like someone saw me, desired me. Next thing I knew we were at his place. I wanted the comfort. I wanted to feel wanted. I was lonely, and Jason was right there. The next morning felt like a ton of bricks on my chest. I knew I'd done something terrible. I felt sick, and that sickness gnawed at me for weeks. But then, my husband and I would have another fight. Another empty night in our king-size bed that felt miles wide. The guilt would fade. The whispers of, "You deserve better" from Jason would get louder. I tried to ignore him at work, pretend it didn't happen. But things would get rough with my husband again. I called Jason, crying, and he was always there for me. It wasn't just about the sex though, that felt good in a way my husband never could make it. It was like I needed proof that someone outside of this stale marriage wanted me. Stupid, I know. I should have just left if I was so unhappy. I'd gotten good at lying, good at hiding my smiles when Jason messaged me during the day, good at erasing the traces of him on my skin and in my scent, until I wasn't good at it anymore. I knew something was wrong when his phone buzzed that weekend. Jason never texted me on the weekends. He knew his girlfriend checked his phone. We were always careful, so this was sloppy. Part of me felt a tiny burst of excitement. Finally, maybe he'd dump her and be all mine. But a larger part of me felt unease. Had he stopped caring about being caught? Or worse, was he trying to get caught? Monday morning the office was normal, at least on the surface. Jason was acting like nothing was different. But I knew. He was avoiding looking at me. His smile was strained. That simmering unease from the weekend twisted into dread within me. Had his girlfriend found something else? Some proof? I tried to work, but my mind raced through every message we'd exchanged. Every suspicious late night. Every lie I told my husband to cover it all. That night, everything exploded. He came home early, face tight and his eyes hard. "Sit down," he said. It wasn't a request. All of a sudden panic took over. Every lie I told, every time I covered my tracks, it all felt useless. Had the police contacted him about a hit and run where I'd left the scene? Or worse yet, had someone been hurt? The scenarios raced through my mind, each more horrifying than the last. "I know about your affair," he said. I could have sworn I stopped breathing. What affair? I tried to sound dumb, innocent, but my voice was a pathetic squeak. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then he practically threw it at me. It landed open on the coffee table. A message from some girl I didn't know, ranting about me, about Jason cheating on her, calling me horrible names. My husband was staring at me, waiting for a response, for an explanation. The dam holding it all in broke. The lies crumbled as useless as ash. It all came out, the ugly truth. Not just Jason, but the others before him. The little flings, the one-night stands meant to fill the emptiness inside me. I saw the disgust on my husband's face, and it mirrored how I felt about myself. I told him I was sorry, begged for forgiveness, but it didn't matter. Words were meaningless now. He didn't yell or scream. He just looked at me like I was a stranger, like he'd never seen me before. He stood up and the silence felt suffocating. "I need you to leave," he said, each word tight and cold. I can't even look at you right now." My hands were shaking as I packed my stuff, a suitcase too small to contain the wreckage of my life. He didn't help me, didn't look at me, just stood in the doorway like a guard keeping me from the home that wasn't mine anymore. Everything swirled, the tears blurring my vision, the buzzing in my ears, the nausea threatening to engulf me. As I walked out, I knew I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving our entire life, and I wasn't sure any of it had been real at all. My parents' house was the only place I could go. The shame burned hot as I made up some lie about a fight, about needing a place to cool off. They looked surprised, confused, but thank God they didn't ask for details. Collapsing on my childhood bed, I thought I'd sob myself to sleep, but there wasn't even that release, just a bone-deep weariness and the sickening feeling that this was only the beginning. The next morning his text cut through the haze. It wasn't an apology, wasn't an "I love you," not even an outright "go to hell." It was worse. 3 words, paternity test. Now, my heart felt like it stopped. Was our child even his? Another lie unraveling, the consequences of my actions echoing into the future. I knew I'd brought this on myself, but some twisted part of me felt anger. How could he doubt me after everything? Didn't he love our child? Can we talk? My text back was pathetic and weak. I hated myself for it, but panic had its claws in me now. There was no reply, just an address and time for the test sent a few minutes later. The coldness of it made me sick. I looked at myself in the mirror, makeup smeared, hair a tangled mess, and saw someone I didn't recognize, someone pathetic, someone who destroyed everything she built. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The clinic, the cold swabs, the nurses' pitying looks. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus. All I could do was replay everything in my head. The fights, my husband's face when I confessed, the sound of the front door closing behind me. I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't sure there was anything left of me to save. The phone rang, and my first instinct was to ignore it. Probably my parents, asking how things were going, if I'd patched things up with my husband. Lies piled on top of lies. I couldn't face them yet, but a flicker of desperate hope made me answer. Maybe by some miracle, it was him saying he wanted to talk, that he wasn't completely done. It was Jason, and it was like I'd forgotten everything. His voice, worried and apologetic, was familiar. "Hey," he said, "I heard what happened. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" The wave of anger was almost a relief. "Heard what happened? You mean what you and your girlfriend caused?" The words burned on the way out, but I couldn't stop them. "Look, I know I messed up," he started, but I cut him off. "Is this a joke? You're calling for sympathy for what? Ruining my life?" I was yelling now, my parents pounding on the bedroom door, probably, but I didn't care. I unleashed everything at him. The pain, the shame, the fact that my marriage was as good as dead. He tried to apologize, saying he never wanted it to go this far, but it felt hollow. Suddenly, I wasn't just angry, I was sad. It was stupid to think he'd actually care about the mess he caused. He was probably panicked about his own relationship. He didn't care that I was broken. When I hung up on him, I felt empty again. His call only made it clear how alone I was. My husband hated me. Jason was nothing but trouble, and soon enough everyone would know. His parents, my in-laws, had been so good to me, and his kids adored me. They'd find out, and they'd choose him. They'd have to, and I couldn't blame them. That night, I heard my husband's car pull into the driveway. Part of me hoped he was coming for me, but it was probably just to get more stuff. The thought of him going through our closet, seeing my clothes, it was too much. My stomach turned at the idea of him discovering something I'd missed. A photo, a gift, a lingering trace of Jason. The question hit me like a cold wave. Did I even truly love him? Was everything we had just comfortable, a convenient routine? It was a painful question, the kind you avoid because you fear the answer. But with ruin all around me, those questions now demanded answers. I couldn't bear to see him, to look him in the eye. So I stayed in my room, listening to the muffled sounds of his footsteps, the creak of closet doors, the drawers opening and closing. Even in his despair, he was tidy. He wouldn't leave a mess just to spite me. That wasn't like him. My own suitcase lay untouched on the bed. Going back seemed impossible, but staying here forever wasn't an option either. I was completely adrift, with nothing solid to hold on to. I needed something, some kind of sign, anything to tell me what to do. And that's when I saw it. The photo album, our honeymoon, tucked away at the back of my nightstand. It was silly to look, torturing myself with those happy memories, but I couldn't stop myself. The first few pages were innocent enough. Beaches, us smiling, stupid drinks with umbrellas in them. But then the photos started to blur in between my tears. Had he always looked at me like that? A little distant, maybe? Or was I just imagining it? Paranoia setting in? My finger stopped on a picture dated a year into our marriage. Me, my husband, and another couple at some restaurant I didn't even remember. But the woman? I did remember her, briefly. Some business contact of his. We'd had dinner once, except the way she was looking at him, the touch of her hand on his arm. It sent a shiver up my spine. I flipped through more pages, dread growing in my stomach. There she was again, at some work event. This time her hand on his lower back. They weren't full-blown affairs, maybe not even physical, but those little moments. They felt like pieces of a puzzle I finally saw clearly. You have a guest. My mom poked her head into the room, a hopeful note in her voice that made me sick. It's his lawyer, I said, my voice flat. I knew what came next, the paperwork dividing our lives into neat little boxes. It seemed like a cruel joke that the same lawyer who'd drawn up our prenup would now make it real, breaking everything we'd ever promised each other. I glanced at the honeymoon album again. Maybe I should just tell the lawyer about everything. Maybe then my husband would finally understand. Or maybe he'd hate me even more. I couldn't just stay hidden in my childhood room forever, but going out into the real world, where people might know, might whisper behind my back, felt terrifying. My husband hadn't even announced it to everyone yet, but it wouldn't be long. He had that kind of circle, tight-knit, gossipy in the kindest possible way. Everyone would find out I was the wife who cheated and destroyed her happy life. That first trip to the grocery store was pure misery. I knew they were looking at me. The old ladies with judgment in their eyes. Those moms from my kids' school with their pitying smiles. Even the teenage cashier with her raised eyebrows. Maybe I was imagining it, but it felt like the word slut hummed in the air. Back at my parents', I hid in the bathroom and splashed cold water on my burning face. This was forever now, even if I got back with my husband, which seemed impossible. I'd never be seen the same way again. And honestly, did I even want to be with him? The old photos made me realize how long the cracks had been there. How I'd plastered over his distance with my own affairs. The news hit the next day. A text from my best friend. Just a link to some local gossip block. It was brutal. Splashy headline. Details about Jason. His girlfriend must have leaked them. Speculation about who else I'd been with. I stared at it until I couldn't read the words anymore. My phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Block numbers. Old friends. Probably even people I barely knew. I turned it off and threw it against the wall. The rage came next. Red hot and blinding. At Jason. At myself. Even at my husband. For being so damn perfect that it drove me to this. Why couldn't he have made a mistake, just once? I wanted to scream, to break something, to drink until everything went fuzzy. I could understand now why people trashed hotel rooms, or crashed their cars. My dad heard the noise. I wouldn't let him in, just listen to him beg me through the door to open up. It must have sounded awful. His sweet daughter turned into this monster. But I didn't know any other way to be right then. I just needed to burn it all down. Even the wreckage of myself. My parents decided enough was enough. I couldn't stay locked in that bathroom forever. My dad barged in, whether I was decent or not. He sat me down on the edge of the bathtub, and his big, work-roughened hands held my face. He wasn't angry, just sad. The kind of sad that cuts deeper than any shouting could. "You messed up, big time," he said, "and there's no fixing that. But you're my daughter, always will be." Something about the simple way he said it made the tears finally break through the numbness. I sobbed like I hadn't since I was a kid. All the shame and anger and fear pouring out. He didn't try to stop me, just held me until the ragged breath slowed a bit. Turns out my parents have a friend with a cabin way out in the woods. Nobody even knows it's there. My dad drove me out that night, the headlights cutting into the darkness like a weak lifeline. He stocked the fridge, hugged me awkwardly, then promised they'd check in every few days, but otherwise leave me alone. Alone was what I wanted, but it was also terrifying. No distractions, no excuses, just me with this broken mess of a life I'd made. At first, it was just sleep. My body finally getting the rest it had denied itself for weeks. When I did wake, I walked in the woods, trying to find a rhythm in my own steps that matched the quiet. One afternoon, my phone rang. My parents, probably. I almost didn't answer, but I figured they'd just worry. Instead, it was a number I didn't know. "Is this her?" The voice was female, sharp and angry. The whore who ruined my life. Jason's girlfriend. My stomach twisted. What did she want from me? To rub it in? Brag that she got him back? Or worse, threaten to tell my husband everything? "Tell you what," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Tell me how your brilliant revenge plan worked out. How's it feel being with a guy who cheats and lies?" There was a long silence. Then she spoke again, softer this time. "He swore it was just you, that it meant nothing. But then his work found out and everyone knows now." She started to cry then, the kind of sobs that echoed my own from a few weeks back. Part of me felt a flash of satisfaction, but it was quickly smothered by weariness. Two women, our lives torn up by the same selfish man. What a mess. In that moment, I couldn't even muster up the energy to hate her. Days turned into weeks in the cabin. I started going for longer walks, the rhythm of it steadying my mind. Sleep was easier, dreams were less brutal. I thought about my husband maybe once an hour instead of every 5 minutes. Progress, I guess. Then a letter came, forwarded from my parents' house. His lawyer, of course. My hands shook as I opened it, half expecting the full scorched earth of divorce proceedings, half hoping for a plea to come back that it was all a mistake. Neither. Instead, it was a careful list of his conditions for considering reconciliation. I snorted out loud, reading it. He wanted control of all the money, every single penny, mine included. He'd need total access to my phone, email, everything. I had to agree to random drug tests, therapy, with a therapist he would choose, and regular check-ins where he basically got to interrogate me about every aspect of my life. Oh, and I had to quit my job, since that's where I'd met Jason. I crumpled the letter and threw it in the fireplace. Who the hell did he think he was? He was perfect. I was the broken one. Yet somehow this was all my fault? Rage bubbled up, hot and familiar. It was so much easier to be furious than to feel the crushing sadness underneath. That night I dreamt about my husband. But in the dream, it wasn't him. Not really. It was his dad. Same stern look, same judgment in his eyes. I woke up gasping, the weight of generational disapproval suffocating me. Was this how my husband saw me now? Damaged goods? Only worthy if I jumped through enough hoops? In the morning the anger lingered, but now it had a different edge. It fueled me as I walked into the tiny town nearby and went to the library. I spent hours on their slow computer reading up on divorce law in our state. The more I read, the sicker I felt. He'd thought of everything, covered his bases. If I fought him on this, I'd likely lose, and lose badly. It wasn't fair, none of it was. But I was done being the one on her knees, begging for table scraps of affection. The next time the phone in the cabin rang, I let the answering machine pick it up. It was my mom worried. I knew I'd have to talk to my parents soon, explain things. But for now, I picked up my walking stick and headed back out into the woods. I had decisions to make, and this time, they would be mine. I started feeling sick a few weeks later. Exhausted, queasy, the cabin spinning around me some mornings. At first, I chalked it up to stress. The constant thrum of anxiety in my stomach, disguising itself as something else. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't just fallout from my colossal mess up, it was a consequence. My parents drove me to the nearest clinic. It was one of those small town places where everyone knows your name, and even with a mask on, I swore the receptionist was judging me. The test felt endless. Then the doctor called me back into her office, her face tight. I braced myself for the words, the confirmation like a final blow I deserved. Well, the doctor started, then frowned slightly. This is unusual. Suddenly, I felt lightheaded, but in a different way than before. Hope was a dangerous, stupid thing, but it bloomed in me anyway. We're going to run some more tests, she said, flipping through my chart, just to be sure. Then hesitantly, she added something I never expected. You said your husband recently demanded a paternity test. I nodded, not daring to hope too much just yet. Given your history, she said slowly, we'll be able to do an extra test, along with the standard ones. It compares the fetal DNA to your own. If your husband isn't the father, well, you'll know for sure. The week of waiting was worse than any before. My parents tried to be supportive, my mom making me bland food, my dad awkwardly offering to watch old movies. But at night, alone with my traitorous body and my racing thoughts, that flicker of hope dimmed into cold terror. Was I facing the consequences of my actions? Or was there a chance that this baby that it might still mean something? Back at the clinic, the doctor handed me an envelope. I was afraid to open it. Afraid it would destroy one future, just when another felt within reach. I made myself take a deep breath and ripped it open. It was all medical